Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Sometimes, boys and girls, you just need to get your freak on. We do that a lot here, or we try to anyway. But if you're within the sound of my voice, it means you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals. We pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. You know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening. And if you are, keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Mash the notification buttons. It gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, the Threads, and probably a few other places that I'm forgetting at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that ultimate kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. In theaters tomorrow, specifically here in Toronto at The Review, it's time for Frankie Freako from writer-director, the one and only Steven Kostanski. And it's the story of a workaholic yuppie, Conor, who is in an existential rut until one night he catches a bizarre ad for a party hotline hosted by a strange dancing goblin known as Frankie Freako. Could this be the recipe to spice up his boring life? If you know a little bit about Steve Kostanski and the kind of movies he makes and the sense of humor he has, this is very much born of the 80s with a real bent and hilarious sensibility that I cannot recommend highly enough. It is a fun movie that if you get a chance to see, you're just going to have a blast with, especially if you are a child of the 80s in the video stores, such as myself and Steven. But in advance of the release tomorrow, if you go to The Review, I think there's still a few tickets left. Steven, I'm pretty sure Steven's going to be there with cast and crew. But you can enjoy our talk with Steven as we talked about Frankie Freako and just sort of the development of it all and how it was born, kind of sort of in between projects, and his nonstop workaholic nature as he keeps churning out the good stuff. But like I said, go check out Frankie Freako if you want to have a good sort of popcorn-filled 80s kind of time. But first, enjoy our talk with Steven, because as always, it's a pretty darn good one. Congrats on Frankie Freako, man. Hell of a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was kind of a random idea that got thrown together fairly quickly. I was between projects. One project got delayed, and so I had this like window of time, and I just got this idea to make a little puppet movie, thinking
Wow.
that would somehow be easier than making a full creature suit movie.
Well,
Like
no, for
it's like
sure. No, absolutely. My God. But I mean, that dovetails into my first question, because I mean, there's such an earnestness to it, but it's so fucked up all at the same time. Like, how do you manage to sort of straddle that line to get these characters sort of into this universe? Because again, it's almost a kids movie, but it's still pretty fucked up.
yeah, I mean it's like demented in its logic.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
Certainly is a movie that operates on like a stream of consciousness, Tim and Eric kind of
Right.
logic.
Right.
Um, it definitely has a lot of like Simpsons to it as well. I'm, very well versed in the first 11, 12 seasons of that show. So I feel like that's always bleeding into any kind of humorous thing I'm doing. But yeah, I don't know. I think part of it is just like hard committing to the universe of the movie. Like I'm not above any of the things I'm making. Like I would happily live in Freak World if I had the choice. Like I love making these universes. I love coming up with these characters. It's like something I'm just really passionate about. So I think that's what hopefully makes my stuff stand out, is that like even though they're dumb as hell, it's like still, a movie that I take the internal logic seriously. So yeah, I think that's part of why it works.
No, I mean, I've always been dying to ask, because I mean, obviously, we all know where you started with Mad Borg, and I mean, we've done the visual effects on a countless array of different shoots. how do you manage, like, for basically as an independent filmmaker, to sort of get the energy up to not just direct and write and deal with your actors, but also have to deal with the puppets and the VFX and just sort of have all that in sort of one melting pot?
Yeah, I mean, I always dive into things head first and put zero thought into how much work they're going to be, and that's why it happens. And always when I'm in the middle of it, I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And then I come up with an idea for a movie like a few months after we wrap, and I'm like, oh, I should do that thing next. And I somehow forget all the awful stuff that went on to get the actual movie made. So, yeah, I think part of it is a willful ignorance of how much work I'm taking on, because it's exhausting trying to juggle writing, directing, editing, creature effects, VFX, like all the lightning effects in the movie are I hand animated all of those like frame by frame just because I
Wow.
wanted that like Big Trouble in Little China
Right.
like hand drawn lightning look. But yeah, I think part of it is I'm just dumb. I don't know the amount of work I'm taking on when I do these things because it's clearly too much for one person, but I keep doing it. So yeah, I don't know.
Did you have any sort of specific inspirations for the puppets? Because I mean, even with Frankie, I was almost thinking, and this is a bit of a stretch, but I mean, I was almost thinking Gwildor from Masters of the Universe.
I mean, we were watching Master of the Universe in the shop the other day, and actually, like Gwildor's definitely a lot closer to a Deathstalker character that I have.
That's true. Yeah,
Not spoil too much with that movie, but I feel like there's a definite Gwildor inspiration in there more so than in Frankie Freako. I think it was like Connor and Adam and Matt were kind of throwing around Andrew Dice Clay as like a starting point, and like which is like a weird way to start designing that character. And I just kept building out from there. Like Matt just did this like weird scratchy voice and as like a temp track for Frankie, and we ended up using most of it because I was like, I like this voice. This is funny. We all the characters like went through so many iterations. They weren't they weren't locked in immediately. They definitely evolved over time. And I was like entertaining a lot of opinions and people kind of like pitching in their 2 cents. My DOP Pierce Dirks was very involved creatively on this, and he gave me a lot of his notes on how all the, you know, puppets and characters should behave and what their deal should be. So it was a very collaborative process coming up with all these things. But yeah, they all definitely evolved over time.
and I mean, how quickly did this one come together? Because I mean, obviously, that's probably a relative statement, given the fact that, like you said, there are puppets, there are visual effects to get to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we what was it? I like handed the team the script, I believe it was like December or November, December of 2022, and then we were shooting April of 2023. So
Wow.
yeah, there's like a 4 month chunk of time where we were prepping and building stuff. Like I only gave myself 8 weeks to do all the prep, like creature effects prep for this movie, which was not enough time, and it definitely hurt me in the actual process of making it because I had never done a puppet movie before. And so it was a big learning curve for me, and a lot of shit went wrong on this one. Stuff that I will know better for next time. Uh, Ways to streamline the process. It was a real kind of make it up as you go movie, for better or for worse.
No, I mean, were places like Raven Manor and Shout on board before you started going, or was this one of those questions of fuck it, I'll worry about selling it later? Because I mean, again, I'm always amazed at just sort of getting this stuff off the ground, especially when there isn't necessarily backing straight away.
Well, the backing was very limited, which I think is why everybody was okay with this movie.
Right.
There's definitely some raised eyebrows when that script got passed around, and I think they just trusted that I would make something that had enough shit in it to get butts and seats, I guess. Like at the very least, whether the humor landed or not, there's like enough effects and wacky stuff in this movie to get eyeballs on it. So I think there was confidence there, even if people didn't fully get what I was going for. But it seems like just based on the early responses and the screenings I've been to, people get the level of stupid I'm going for with this film, which is nice.
Well, and I mean, you're playing to sort of the audience of the child of the children of the '80s, obviously, and I mean, it works so well. And I mean, for you, obviously, as a filmmaker and a storyteller, I mean, you're heavily influenced by that. But I mean, what is it about sort of that that, that dusty VHS time period that is so sort of emotionally endearing, not just for comedy, but for genre and for horror to be able to have stuff like this still be able to be made.
I mean, I think the big point of influence for me being a video store kid was just it really opened my imagination walking into the genre sections and just seeing how much stuff there was. Uh, like looking at the covers, like reading the backs of these movies. It was just such a fun activity to do every weekend. Just go and scour the video store for like, some cheap 7-day rentals to consume with my friends with, some chips and pop on a Saturday night. And I don't know, it's just like it's burned in my brain as like one of the happiest and also just like most creatively influential times because I feel like it opened my brain up to a lot of concepts that it wasn't really familiar with. Like because of video store culture, I was able to get into horror movies. I was able to get into fantasy movies. I My tastes were like pretty limited as a kid. I felt like I liked like Godzilla movies and Transformers and Star Wars and not much else, and I didn't deviate from that uh, until I, saw Army of Darkness and then was like, wait a second, there's like other stuff out there that's like maybe a little scary, maybe a little horny, like stuff that seemed like kind of adult to my kid brain, but being able to branch out into that stuff, uh, again, like opened my imagination, I think like really influenced my voice as a filmmaker.
No, I mean, I'm curious because obviously the first time you and I ever met and got to talk was in the Manborg days. But I'm curious, sort of, how do you think you've evolved as a storyteller over what's basically a decade since Manborg, if my timing's right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like thinking about that. I don't like the passage of time. But yeah, a lot of stuff has happened since then. I mean, life happens, and I definitely have a lot more life experience that came out of the process of making films and working in effects. A lot of like hard life lessons that are definitely informing my storytelling, informing my humor. It's weird. It's like I'm aging and I'm getting more and more juvenile, and part of that I feel like is me an act of defiance against like modern genre movie culture, everything just seeming like it's aiming for some sort of prestige. Like even in the days of doing The Void, is constant talk of like give us like an elevated genre film, and like I feel like that's so reductive that it
We
annoys
almost need to
me
go
that
the other way, right? Yeah.
yeah, I kind of want to go so far in the other direction that it like makes those people's heads explode. Like that seems like a a more interesting artistic move. So yeah, I feel like as I age and get more jaded by the film industry, I just want to make sillier and sillier movies because it's a type of movie that people aren't making. And it's a type of movie I feel like a certain segment of the industry doesn't have a lot of respect for or think there's any value in. And I think there is lots of value in having some lighter fare to balance out your heavier, darker genre stuff. And going back to the video store days and what like what I grew up on, I think that's what I liked was the variety. And that's what I'm not getting right now is I'm not getting variety. I'm getting a lot of like one movie's successful, so everything copies that movie, and we're in like these phases. And I just want to somehow get back that feeling of walking into a video store, going through the aisles, and there's just like a full spectrum of storytelling from like light, goofy, humorous stuff to really dark and grim stuff. And I want to be able to pick whatever based on the mood I'm in. So I'm just trying to like balance things out, I guess, is what
Did a
I'm
lot of
saying.
that play, especially when like you had to work on other people's shoots as well? Because I mean, obviously, I mean, the first Pacific Rim was such a big deal. I can imagine sort of anytime you'd be sort of going out for any other kind of job, they'd be like, "Oh, just give us more of that."
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff, like I'm so grateful to be able to even just work on those things.
Right.
The like big movie world and the like Steve movie world always felt so separate. It still feels like that. Like it feels like I'll work on big projects and I'm a different guy almost. I'm on set with my makeup bag, gluing a makeup on, and I'm just like a cog in the machine, and I'm happy to do it because the thing about that is I get a paycheck, whereas indie
That.
filmmaking isn't really isn't the most lucrative career path. So that's why I have to juggle both is, it's something needs to pay the bills, and it's not necessarily my little genre movies that I'm making. So
No, I mean, I
yeah, but
gotta
I
ask,
love.
other than the paycheck and the obvious catering situation, like, is there one stark difference between sort of the Hollywood world and the Steve world?
They seem to have so much money. It's like crazy. Like they'll just have an abundance of everything, and then I am on my movies, and I'm fighting to have like more than one tent when I'm out on location somewhere, or like fighting to have bottled water. It's like such a sharp contrast, and it is nice to go on those sets and be like, just feel like a little pampered and treated like a human being.
For sure,
But
for
yeah.
sure. And I mean, just put a bow on this. Obviously, it's coming out Friday in select cinemas, and people are going to get to see it. I know you've had your festival run with Fantasia, and people got to see it there. With something like this for you, is sort of the release moment, sort of the moment where you get to sort of let Frankie go out into the universe? Because obviously, anytime you get to do these stories in like you said, the Steve universe, they're very personal stories to you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the festival experience, like seeing it at Fantasia and seeing it at Fantastic Fest, those were cathartic for me. It was like a definitely the release of the movie. Like I'm putting it out into the world. Now it doesn't belong to me. It was something I was kind of robbed of with PG because, it was peak pandemic time, of
Yeah,
course. Like festival premiere was supposed to happen like the weekend the world shut down. So it was the worst timing imaginable. So yeah, I never really got that feeling with PG of like, okay, it's done. I can move on. Not to say it didn't have like a very successful like VOD and streaming run and did a bunch of like kind of little theater screenings here and there. But with Frankie, this definitely feels more like, okay, it's like coming out, it's following like the proper cycle of these things. I'm doing press, uh, going to screenings. It's definitely very rewarding, and especially with a movie like this where I I don't like sitting through my movies, but with this movie, I like watching it with an audience because there's so many befuddled reactions to
I love
moments
it.
in the
I
movie.
love it.
So many dumb moments that like you'll hear audible reactions in the theater for certain parts where people are like, "What?" And that just warms my heart because that's what I want. I want people to be bewildered. I don't want this to be a safe, easy ride. I want it to delight some and irritate others, I guess, is my goal.
Well, you know what, man? Thank you for making a descended genre movie, which, contrary to the elevated, because I mean, honestly, man, this movie's gloriously dumb, and I absolutely loved it. I can't wait for more
Oh,
people to see
thank
it,
you.
but I mean, I think the review's going to be a full house on Friday. But just again, man, keep up the good work, brother. Can't wait for the next one.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I'll keep making them as long as guys like you keep watching them.
That's the plan. I love it. All right, thanks again, Steven. Get back to work.
I will. Back to work for me.
Well, hey, no, you're in the studio. I can tell you. I'm in my office. You're in yours.
I literally have to go back and make some molds now. So it never stops.
Thanks again, brother.
All right.
All right, cheers,
Till
man.
next time.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.